talk. So our first talk today is with Felix Rieseberg. Rieseberg. How do you pronounce it correctly? I lived in Germany for a while, and it would be Riesenberg, I think.
It's a funny question. I've been in the Silicon Valley for like 13 years now, and I never really figured out how I really want people to pronounce it. Rieseberg works fine, but I'll take anything.
Yeah.
It's really fine.
How would your mom say it? It's German. Like, what would you say?
Rieseberg, which is like difficult to translate. There's like a lot of tones.
Berg is
I think
mountain. Riese not like vacation? Oh, that's Riese. Riese is
yeah,
big.
it's different. It's like I think like the direct translation would be like big mountain, which is
Yeah.
really funny because it's an area in Germany with like nothing but like the tiniest hill.
Where is it? Where in Germany are you from?
I'm from the west, like sort of very
Like
close to Amsterdam, about 3 hours from Paris, like right at the border.
Aachen area?
Um,
That area, like near Aachen and near.
yeah, like around there, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's a beautiful area. I love. I mean, great wine too. Cool place to be from. I lived in Stuttgart for a long time, like 8 years between Stuttgart.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Like for automotive?
What's that?
For automotive, were you there for the car
No,
companies?
I was a kid. My father was a contractor to the U.S. Army, and I worked there
Oh,
for.
cool.
I went to gymnasium for a couple of years, so I could speak some German, but it's kind of fallen away. The problem is everybody in Germany speaks like perfect English. When I go there, I'm like, I don't really need to learn my German again.
Yeah,
Um,
don't bother with it. It's a difficult, hard language, right?
it's good though. Great food, great people. I love Germany. Stephen is joining us from Nigeria, right? Are you near Lagos? Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah, you're right.
Ah, yeah. Global episode today. And Stephen, you're going to be talking to us about micro VMs. I know this is an area Darren sort of was super excited to have you on the podcast to get into. So really excited to have you with us today as well.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get started. Felix, it's been a crazy, I guess every month feels crazy from Anthropic these days. There's so much cool shit you guys are doing. But I'm super excited to hear about, obviously, the work on desktop extensions. We were gushing over it here on the podcast 3 weeks ago. But also the announcement just this week about the sort of local MCP directory and what you guys are doing there. So let me turn the stage over to you, and we'd love to hear more about what you're working on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm pretty excited about it too. So I joined Anthropic fairly recently, like maybe 2 months ago. And my actual mandate is to take over Claude for macOS and Windows. So I'm going to build a new team to really take over the desktop apps and really think what Claude can do on your computer. And this is really the project that I've been like obsessed with even before I joined Anthropic. Like sometimes you have these things that you like join companies for because you feel like someone needs to build this. And this is sort of like the thing where I joined the company within hours. I cornered people. I was like, I have this idea. We need to build this thing. And this thing specifically is I'm such a big fan of like computing locally, right? Like I've been a desktop developer for like 14, 15 years. I've always really thought about the ability to like empower people on their computers and especially empower developers on their computer, right? Like I've been working in open source and Electron and just cross-platform development for many years. And I think MCP, especially local MCP, has this unique opportunity to allow developers out there to connect all of their apps and data and like users' apps and data to LLMs. And the one thing I think we were really missing was to make that quite portable and easy to install. So we have so many amazing MCP servers out there, but if I build one, it still seems like people are sort of sharing Git repos with each other and like a set of installation instructions. And they're like, okay, you clone this repo, then you install the dependencies here. And then you got to have like these 5 dependencies installed, like to run the scripts. And I think we can really do better. Like at the beginning of time, that's also how you hacked on Visual Studio Code or how you hacked on your browser with like browser extensions. And my feeling really was, okay, we gotta package these MCP servers up. Like I should be able to send you just a file. You double click that file, and now you have a local MCP server. And that is pretty much what we built. So I have 2 demos for you. The first one I'm going to show is I'm going to show you what the user experience is like, and sort of what would an end user who's not a developer see. And then I'm going to show you a little bit about how you would actually develop this. Like, does that sound good? Should we?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect flow.
Okay. Cool. So let's start with the user experience. This is the thing that launched this week. So this is Claude, but maybe one thing I should say before we get started here is that this entire desktop extensions concept is like on purpose extremely open source. And Claude is just one implementation, but you're not really seeing anything that you couldn't add to any other LLM or model application, which is quite on purpose. And I think in spirit with both how MCP carries itself, but also how Anthropic thinks about open source in the ecosystem. But without further ado, so we have a directory, you already mentioned it. We're splitting up the directory into two separate areas. The first one is web. To developers, we can just call these remote MCP. And then we have desktop extensions, which to developers we can just call local MCP. And you might be wondering why we're not straight up calling this MCP. We thought about the terminology here quite a bit. And I personally have this belief, and I think it's still a little bit to be tested, but I personally have this belief that end users, as in like real customers, the ones that are supposed to use what all of the people on this call and like everyone is listening to me right now, right? Like we're all developers. But end users don't care if AirPlay uses Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And they don't care that when they're talking to Google that it's like TCP IP, right? Like Chrome is not the TCP IP protocol inspector. It's a browser. So we're calling them connectors to like make it more clear what these things do. But what you're looking at here right now is our currently directory of like 20 or so extensions. And these are just packaged up MCP servers. So you can see that when I click on this, it tells me a little bit about the Figma dev mode. It tells me that this thing is installed. And if I maybe install another one here for fun, like the file system one, I can just hit this install button. It's going to ask me if I want to install it. And we're just doing things for you. We're just like grabbing the MCP server for you. We're unzipping it locally. We're putting it in a folder. There's a little bit of configuration. If any of you have used the MCP server for the file system before, normally you're supposed to add this as an argument to your node process. Unnecessary for normal users. We can just like add a directory manually. We can just say, okay, cool, we're just gonna add my desktop here, save, and then we're done. And I can then enable this extension server, and now it's running. And a few more things that are cool here. As an end user, you don't need to have Node.js installed. We're just running Node.js for you. You don't need to worry about the dependency management. You don't need to worry about like, okay, you got to run npx with the following arguments. And if you run the wrong arguments and you escape certain paths wrong, we manage all of that for you. And yeah, like the Figma dev mode one is very similar, right? Like if we go into the developer mode here and we maybe look at a little bit of this, we can see that in my actual application directory, these are just normal servers, right? Like this is the Figma dev mode server with node modules and like a manifest and package.json and everything else that comes with it. But an end user doesn't really care about that. And there's a few other things that are interesting about this for this configuration. We're doing some things that I think are quite important to me as a desktop developer. A lot of these MCP servers involve sensitive data, for instance, API keys. And I think today, in the way we've been developing for a long time, they just exist on disk in like a raw file. And that feels bad to me. And I think one thing we can do as implementers of these desktop apps, if you do this here, we encrypt them using your operating system secret crypt. So like DP API on Windows or the classic macOS keychain on macOS, right? Where we just like keep your secrets somewhat safe. And we can do more things here. We can like do code signing for these. So I can like tell you the same way when you go to https://google.com, you have this trust. This is really from Google and wasn't modified by someone else. We can do the same code signing with these extensions, sort of cryptographically verify that they're actually from Figma, not from anyone else. And we can auto-update these extensions. So we can sort of do all the things that I think you would expect from a quote-unquote modern app store, right? Without having to worry about any of the details. The goal here really is to make this like very easy for users.
As the non-developer here, I mean, this is, MCP has been, it's been work for me. I've had to go and really, really build out a lot of skills that I didn't have beforehand, because just to get MCPs working and just to figure out how to consume them all. So I've been super excited about this because it just feels the most obvious next step is that this stuff should be at your fingertips, easy to deploy, easy to consume, and this is a big. I think this is a big jump forward, and it's something that is going to be the default way that we interact with LLMs as typical users.
Yeah, I totally agree. It should just be so easy, right? Like one of the extensions that I'm more excited about is the one from Figma, where you can just connect your, in our case, Claude to Figma, and you can ask Claude to like please set up like design various things from Figma for you. This works really well. maybe I'm gonna show you real quick the end result here, but I have this like Figma design, and I can just copy this link, and then we can do this again. Like we can watch this. I can say, hey, can you turn this into HTML, please? And there's nothing fundamentally new here for anyone on this call has like worked with MCP for quite a while. So what you're watching here are just tool calls with MCP. None of that is particularly new. But the thing that's really exciting to me is that designers can now do this without having to worry about whether or not they have NPM or Node or any of the tools that you would otherwise expect a developer to have. And certainly a designer who's like working in Figma now doesn't have to worry about Git or Git clone and then like, running the wrong Node version and like NPX doesn't work. This just works out of the box.
It's crazy. This just the playing field too, is that in terms of people who would otherwise just not be able to get here. I mean, it's really exciting. I mean, I just think about, I was running, 500-600 person sales organizations, and it's shocking how many people, if they knew how to do this, they understand what they want. It's just the ability to bring together all the packaging and all the stuff so that they can actually, gather the information to put it into some repeatable process or some automation. And now that knowledge gap is like shrinking.
Yeah, totally. And as an enterprise too, like one thing I've been hearing a lot from people is they want to pre-install extensions. They want to have a bit more tight control over what kind of extensions people install.
Yeah.
They don't really want to get, like if you're a security conscious enterprise, you don't really want to teach your users that they should just git clone random dependencies and install them, right?
Yeah.
Like that's certainly maybe for developers, but and what you can do as an enterprise here, even with your in-house extensions, because they just exist on file, right? Like if you put them into this folder, you're good. You can pre-install extensions with your normal fleet management, like even the in-house ones. So then when users open up their machine, they get their laptop on their first day, all of the right MCP servers are already there. And as an enterprise, you can make it very easy for, one example I really liked was a biolab that is using like an internal MCP server to connect it to an internal genome database. And they don't have to teach any of the researchers how to do any of that. It just works, right? They just open up the laptop and it's there. But should we talk about the developer stuff? Because I think that's actually more exciting than what you've been seeing so far.
I want one question, but it starts getting to the developer side is because developers will first start asking about what's the security bar on all of this? How safe is this? What, all of those things. And so I don't know if that's something you want to talk about now, or there's something you're going to get into.
If you want to, we can talk about it now. I can give you a little bit of my philosophy about this that I think has worked, and also like my philosophy in terms of what we know works. So from my point of view, local MCP servers, there we go. That actually looks not great, but I think that's just mobile mode. This is pretty good. By the way, this only doesn't work. The image is only missing because we don't allow you to load images. But if we save this, we're just going to put it here. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. But yes, let's talk about security. I think security is also like something that's very dear and close to my heart. So local MCP servers really are just programs, right? They're just processes you run on your machine. And I'm suspicious of anyone who's ever claimed that they can completely secure a binary running on your machine. It's a little easier with Python or JavaScript because we can actually read the code and can have a little bit of trust. But generally speaking, I think we've learned from Chrome extensions, Visual Studio Code extensions, and even from Apple and Windows that it's much more important that you trust the developer than that you trust the actual code. If I get code from Google, I feel a lot better about that than if I get code from shadywebsite.com. So I think our approach here is going to be, at least in the short term, mimic really closely what we're doing on macOS and Windows, where code signing doesn't verify that the application is safe itself. Of course, there's like a little bit of rudimentary checking you can do, and we will do that. But what we really want to teach people is that they should trust the author. And that's what macOS does, right? Like if you download an application, macOS doesn't actually check that the application is safe. It doesn't do that. What macOS does is it checks that the application is really code signed, the same way that a browser verifies that HTTPS www.google.com is from Google. And if it can't verify their trust chain, if that developer has not signed the application with something that goes up the trust root chain, then it blocks the execution. And from a security point of view, what I would recommend for the community going forward is like a little to be determined whether or not that's the right approach. But I think we should take lessons from browser extensions, from Visual Studio Code extensions, and also just from programs and operating systems, and try to apply the same lessons to local MCP servers.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable approach. So it's kind of like is the process right now of getting, getting like the developer, once they develop their connector, is getting it into the Claude app that's going through a code signing process. So that's, you need a signing key, and that's kind of what you guys are enforcing. So it's the trust is really starting first with Anthropic or Claude, and then you guys validate that forward.
Yeah, exactly. But that being said, I think it was important to me that you don't necessarily need us. It's important to me that like Anthropic doesn't have to be the man in the middle. You should be able to run local MCP servers with, I think, trust, even if you're building your own local MCP servers. And what we're using here is we're using classic PKCS 7. Actually, we're moving to PKCS 11 certificates. And any code signing provider, be that DigiCert or AWS, or these days it's actually Microsoft itself, if you have a private key, you can sign all of these DXT extensions. And we will verify that signature as we load the extension. And if it doesn't verify, we're actually going to warn you. And we will by default block the installation. Right now, you can install by default unsigned extensions, just because I think we have to educate the community a little bit about the value of code signing. But as an enterprise, there's already a setting in Claude where you can say, okay, I only want users to be able to install signed extensions. And you can get a certificate from anyone. If you want to, as an enterprise, you can even install a root certificate on your machine, so you don't need to pay someone money, right? You can just say, okay, we want to be able to sign our own extensions. But you sort of do this the same way that you would manage which root certificates your machine trusts for actual applications or for websites. So it like verifies it up the entire root chain.
Yeah, because that was one of the technical questions I had was, like when you go to a website, you get a certificate for that domain, so then okay, well, the website the certificate says matches the website. So if you're loading it, from disk, what is that like? Have you verified like the identity of that certificate? Does it somehow track back to DNS somehow? You're actually going to like you can say, oh, this actually comes from Google because it's somehow tracks back to google.com.
It's a good question. So the way this works is, and everyone sort of has their own system, we write the certificate chain at the end of the zip file. So we're going to talk in a little bit about what the extensions look like. They're just zip files. So the last couple of bytes are the certificate. Chrome extensions put the certificate at the beginning of the zip file. Visual Studio Code extensions, I think, also put them in at the end. But it works fundamentally the same way that code signing works, where the certificate, the public key, is embedded into the binary itself. And then as you boot it up, the operating system goes, okay, does this actually verify using my root certificates that I have here? Like, has this certificate been published by someone I trust? And then it sort of goes up the entire chain locally on your machine. And you as an enterprise can configure what should be trusted and what shouldn't be trusted.
Yeah, I think there's still like my mind is, well, whatever. I'm just getting too technical probably at this point. Is like the because it's like you go, oh, it's signed by VeriSign. Well, is VeriSign still really a thing? But anyway, so it's signed by VeriSign, but it doesn't matter that it's signed by VeriSign. It's also like from this domain. So there's always a secondary, like the subject name or the common name of like, how do you know that this is really who they say they are?
I see what you're asking.
Yeah, so it's like, because browsers just implicitly do it for you, because when you type in the URL, they just go, oh, well, the URL has to match, right? But like, I'm not getting it from a URL. So then the question is like, when you show the identity like of the certificate, do you trust that identity? And is it like how much beyond just the words you're reading? So I don't know what the answer, like how to do these things. But it was just really funny that you mentioned that you put the certificates at the end, because when I first saw this format, the first thing I thought of, which was really funny, was this is my Java background, was I'm like, oh, it reminds me of a jar, because a jar file for Java is just a zip file. But there's one unique thing about a jar file is they put the manifest file as the very first file in the beginning. So it's like, this is just basically a zip file, but the one special thing is there's a certificate at the very end.
Exactly. Yeah. We can talk more about like how the certificates work within DNS and how they work here. But I think
I think we should probably get into the other stuff. That's good. Super starter, but it's nice to hear. I think that's a reason, because this is something I've struggled with a lot of, like, also from a security perspective, is like sandboxing versus trust. So like you're kind of going more towards the trust approach, which I think is a very pragmatic, reasonable thing, which we know pretty much scales. And like, I think when you get the diehard security people, they're like, no, everything has to be sandboxed. And so, that's kind of like, well, maybe something that can be added later or whatever. But I think the trust model is the one that, it's like just the most pragmatic thing, where like that's the thing that seems to like just initially kind of work well. And it's like, well, yeah, there are
always where it starts. It always starts there. And there's nothing that starts with sandboxing hardly. It always starts with trust, and then over time, certain people invest in that next layer of sort of running everything on its own little world.
Yeah,
developer. I definitely want to get into sort of Felix, what developers should take away from this, how they can submit to the directory, how can they get involved?
Oh man, I'm so happy you asked. So let's first briefly think about, you have an MCP server, how do you make an extension? What does that look like, right?
Yeah.
So what I brought you is something I'm sure many of you have seen before. It's the weather service TypeScript. It's the default extension. It's the default MCP server that we've all worked with quite a bit. And if you want to turn this MCP server into an extension, what we really got to do is we got to package it up. And we already talked about the fact that extensions are just zip files. So we basically just take everything in this folder and zip it up. And then we have to describe this extension to an implementing application, in our case, Claude. So that Claude knows what this is. Like, who is it from? What does it do? What should we call this thing? Which version does it have? And we built a utility for this. It's called DXT. Unsurprising. So you can install this utility, and then you have it. And then there's two commands you can run. The first one is DXT init. And if you just run this command, it's going to give you a long questionnaire, ask you about everything it wants to know, give you ample opportunities to like add a support homepage and a long description and explain the tools. You can also do the quick thing and just run it with --yes, in which case it uses sort of the right default values. And what it does here is it creates a manifest.json. And you already talked about jar files, but I think a manifest.json is something that works really well for Chrome extensions, for Visual Studio Code extensions. It's like the concept of, I have a bunch of stuff here. Please explain to someone who's supposed to use this what this is about. And there's a number of fields. The entire spec for this is public. It's open source. I'm going to show the GitHub repo in a little bit. But the key point here is that it contains information about the server, and it also contains the server configuration. How should the implementer run this? And there's a little bit of interesting stuff here that makes this easier for developers, which is variable substitution. So I can also write down what kind of configuration values I want to grab from the user and then substitute them in my config. So we have this manifest, and now I can run DXT pack, and that gives me a manifest file. Sorry, it gives me a DXT file. It's right here. And we can open this up in Finder, and I can just say open with Claude. Oh God, I have too many. As the Claude developer, I have too many of them. So we're just gonna do this. We're just gonna drag this onto Claude down here, and it's gonna pop up. Hey, do you want to install this? And we already talked a little bit about trust, right? Like this one is currently unsigned, but I can hit the install button. It's gonna ask me if I want to do it, and now it's installed. That's all there was to it. Like you didn't have to do anything else, and now it's in here. And I think one thing I'm personally pretty excited about is the opportunity to like configure things fairly easily, so you don't have to worry too much about how configuration should work, and also do platform overrides.
When I looked at the manifest, because I was going through the spec, I really appreciate it because you can tell that like I like it when a specification comes out of like an actual implementation, and you can really tell you're addressing pragmatic issues of how are you really going to put this into a UI and display it. And so I really appreciated the configurability aspect of like how you can configure it and put in the questions, and it's a directory or whatever. It's quite nice. It was a really good user experience at the end of the day.
Thank you. I will say it's really early days, right? Like we versioned the 0.1 for two reasons. One is we're probably going to get some things wrong. Like the first version of anything I ever released was not perfect. The first version of MCP was not perfect. So we already encountered some errors where we're like, ooh, there's maybe things we should do a little differently. Like as an example, I already talked about user config. I talked to the Puppeteer people. This is how you do the user config. There are some things we maybe got wrong about this, where some MCP servers need to be configured in such a way that we can't model well. Platform overrides work for operating systems, but not for architectures. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is if this format turns out to be actually quite successful, and I think early days look really good. Like I'm so excited with the amount of extensions I see out there. So it seems like there's a decent appetite for this. If this format of a manifest.json seems useful, I suspect that we will increasingly move this into the server.json within the steering committee and model context protocol. And we sort of like piece by piece dissolve the manifest.json into the server.json that the model context protocol community is currently working on. And
that's I think that's totally the right approach, because I'm glad to hear you're thinking that way, because it is this thing where it's like, if you take from a pragmatic look, I've already implemented this, and this does have kind of like, it just doesn't have the remote aspects. But I was kind of curious how you guys are doing the remote aspects. But anyways, the remote's pretty easy. It's just a URL for the most part. But yeah, so that idea of basically just moving this, because you already have everything. It's really nice, because I see a very synergy between like, well, what the like kind of the registry working group is doing and stuff. It's like, how do you get these two things together?
Absolutely, totally right. Like, and everyone working on the registry has been super nice. We're talking about it. I have a decent amount of to-dos to like actually inform them about what we need to change about server.json, so that an app like Claude could easily live off just the server.json.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But I do think my dream for this entire format is that DXT becomes just a file format, and the manifest.json sort of disappears into the server.json. I think it's yet to be determined which pieces we like and need to move over, which ones we don't like and maybe need to change before it moves into the model context protocol. And I think doing it sort of on the side was a nice opportunity to first prove out the concept, make sure we get some of the basics right before we move it into the, I think at this point, like widely adopted model context protocol, where I think the quality bar should be a little higher. I think we're at the point where I'm quite confident that something like this is necessary and good, like the idea of packaging up local MCP servers. Some parts about the manifest.json I really like, and they're working really well. Some parts a little unsure of, like something that I'm still really split on is what should we do about Python?
I was going to ask, because Python, I unfortunately started with Python with this, and it was super bumpy. Yeah.
Like the thing that's really tricky is that Python by design is not super portable. I think UV is trying to make that a little bit better, but it's still very hard. So it sends you down this path of, for Node.js, it's pretty easy to say, okay, this should just be standalone. Like it should just run everywhere. And that's something we've done quite a bit with a number of applications, right? Like anyone who's running Visual Studio Code or Figma or whatever, you're all running like a portable version of Node.js through Electron. And as the Electron developer, I have a lot of experience in getting that to work. And I think Python has a lot of very fundamental assumptions where it's really meant to be this one binary that runs on a computer and can like put files anywhere. So I'm still a little unsure where we're going to take this. Like, should we run a post install step? Like, should we ship UV maybe for people?
Yeah, I mean, because I've spent a little bit of time doing this or whatever, and I kind of feel like with MCP, it's kind of like this net new thing wherever it's greenfield. People are writing things now, and most MCP servers are really just shimlingers. They tend to be a little lighter than they're talking to something else. That I would what I'd love to see is just say just standardize on UV right now. Like just start with UV. That's really the only way to do it. Because beyond, if you just try to do plain old Python, you're right. There's just too much stuff. And so UV has really put a lot of sanity around it, and it's very compatible with it. So I don't know. That would be my 2 cents.
Yeah. I think I sort of agree with you. There's a lot of things we still need to work through. Like the security aspect, a little, like any kind of post-install step is always a little scary, right?
Yeah.
That's always like, ooh, how do you... Like, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to make this a lot better, especially for Python. I also think that Python, some of the most interesting applications I've seen were written in Python. Like one of the default examples we had as we were developing this was like a Game Boy extension where you can just watch Claude play Game Boy.
Yeah.
Not super useful, doesn't make your work life in any way better, but it's like cool to see, right? You can just like send someone an extension, they double click it, and now Claude is playing a Game Boy game. But that kind of interesting stuff happens a lot in Python. And a lot of the researchers out there working in biolabs code in Python. And I do want to make that very, very easy. I do want them to be able to send this to their colleagues without saying, oh, are you running Python 3.12 or 13? Like, and where is it installed? Is it called Python or Python 3? Like, I want to cut out all of these troubles. I also understand that when security people talk to me and I tell them, ooh, and then once you double click this file, we're going to download and run random code, that they're going to have an aneurysm with me, right? I understand that. But I think as a community, we'll find the right thing.
Yeah.
Guys, I just want to be conscious of time. We're at about 40 minutes.
Oh, sure.
For sure.
When you let us...
So we should probably... Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just say one last thing, which is like, if you go to anthropic.com/engineering, at the very top there, you should see desktop extensions. If you are building a cool MCP server, both local or remote, we now have a directory, send it to us. We would like to feature it. That's all I'm going to say.
And how do they send it to you? What's the process?
So we have an interest form at the very bottom. So you sort of have to like fight your way through this entire thing. It's very early days. But there's an interest form where we ask you at the top, do you want this for local MCP servers or remote MCP servers? You fill this out. It's not like it ends up in like a big hard disk machine. All of these emails go straight to me. We'll look at all of them, and I would love to put them in Claude.
Yeah, you can sell this.
Okay, really ask yourself: is this cool or is it the same thing as everyone else? It better be cool. Everyone's sending him a whole bunch of crap. Okay,
everyone is working on cool things.
One or two cool things from our audience. Thank you, people. Felix, thanks so much for coming on, man. Super exciting, great work. Love how open everything is and how this can be used not just in the Claude universe, but I think everything you've shown us, app developers, people building cool MCP, enterprise product, whatever, there's stuff to be taken from here that could standardize and make the lives of MCP developers more consistent when they move from customer to customer, depending on what platform that user, whether they're using Goose or they're using Claude or they're using VS Code or whatever they're using as the clients. This is great stuff. So thank you. This is awesome.
I really appreciate Anthropic being so open and open source friendly with MCP, with this desktop, all these specifications and stuff. It's great, and you can see how quickly it's just getting picked up. So.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.